Hello everyone, I am Nu-Trix, and today we're talking about Nektar Impact Mini or LX Mini. There's a lot of mobile controllers out there. There's a lot of these USB controllers connected to your computer or your iPad, and that's interesting because a lot of us are making music on mobile devices, and we're putting that in our bag and using it anywhere. How this one compares to the other one. That's one thing I want to talk about today. What's the difference is. Nektar reached out to me and said, well, have you ever tried one of our devices? And honestly, no. I read about it. It looks interesting on paper, but never touched it, used it. The feeling of the device, the hardware, the finish of it, and what it can do. And I found that I'm actually surprised of what this thing can do. It has some features that makes it unique compared to other hardware controllers, USB controllers that you have today. So what's different? First of all, you have, let's go through what it normally has like everybody else. It has keys, in this case, mini keys, and they're velocity sensitive. You have a controller, which is a pitch bend it's a joystick. You have pitch bend from left to right, and you have up, you have modulation, and down you have whatever you want. You can assign it to something else. You have pads for drums, but there's a little twist here, and we'll talk about that. And you have a bunch of knobs. And well, okay, you get 8 knobs here that can be assigned to whatever you want, but there's something special here. And you have a lot of controllers here to control the transport of a song. And actually, this is where this is different. In every of these little aspects, there's always something that is different. They add more. And just for the information, there's no connector at the back. It's all on the side. And you have USB, you have a on-off switch, and you have a pedal, which is kind of rare for this size of device. You have a sustain pedal, which is interesting. You have an adapter for this because it's a small connector. It's 1/8 of an inch. And then you connect to your normal size pedal. And then you have a sustain pedal. Again, very rare for this size of a portable keyboard. No batteries. It works straight out of the USB connector, and it's USB compliant. So it doesn't need to have a driver at all, which is a big plus for me because the first thing is if it's USB compliant, it will be also iPhone and iPad and Android compliant because it doesn't need drivers. And that's a huge plus in my book. So today, I'm going to talk about how this works and the advantage, and also a little hack or a little surprise that it's nowhere to be found on their website. I got this to work with their help. I got this to work with Ableton 10, which is not supposed to be or not supported, but it still works really well. So what's different? Okay, you have this section here, which is basically transport, stop, play, record, forward in the session. You can actually forward in the measures. You can activate the loop, and there's a shift. Well, what it means is that all of these can also, if you press on shift, now it's track selection. You're moving between tracks, and there's patch selection. When you're opening up a plugin, you can switch patches. It doesn't work all the time because the plugin have to be made so it supports it. If they're well made, most of them do it. Like native plugins from every software will work with this. Others might not. So I'll show you. S2, S3, and S1, they can control different things in the software. In the case of Ableton Live, you can switch on and off some windows. Under it, you've got octave up and down, and you've got part 2. And this is a cool thing. Look also that anywhere else on the keyboard, you have controllers, you get values you can change. You can assign MIDI to controller, you can learn the pad themselves, they can learn which pad you want to play. You can save the pad mat because these pads can be assigned to whatever you want. And there's actually 4 memories. I'm not sure. There's like a couple of memories you can do with them. And there's a part 2. So octave of the part 2, channel of the part 2, and transposing of the part 2. And is it a layer or is it just another? You're just switching, because what it means is as you play on one part, the normal one, when you press part 2, you can actually switch to the other part and play that. So the other part could be another channel. It could be layers, so you play the 2. It could be switching between the one. It can be an octave higher. So you can play like, I don't know, a bass, and then you can switch back to your part 1, and the bass would play if you have, let's say, an arpeggiator on it or stuff like that. So it's a different take on how to use it, and it's interesting because it's not something we see often. And then you've got the tempo you can control here, and the USB port mode, the different port mode for the USB. So this is internal stuff that you expect to have in most controllers, but you already see that there's a part 2, which is a different way of looking at it. The other one I want to show you is on this side over here. You have instrument, internal, function, and on and off. And look at this square here. You've got arpeggiator. First thing first, you have instrument. What's interesting is if you're in a DAW, you press instrument and you have a plug-in instrument turned on, you now have these to control default values. So cutoff, volume, resonance, stuff like that, you know? So it's really interesting to have them, and they're pre-assigned. So, and there's a list of, oh my God, probably 10 or 11 different DAWs that it already supports. Now, when you use that, you need to have this assignment of controllers, and it needs to be installed in, let's say, Reason, Studio One, Live. There's a bunch of them, Cubase, and so on. So you just need, it's basically loading a remote, I would say, assignment so that this works the way it should. And that also opens up these other function here. And keep in mind, there's another, if you press on Shift and press on a button, there's a third value or control you can send with that. So these can be used for 3 different ways of using each buttons here. If you press on arpeggiator and on, you're turning on arpeggiator, this one here. So if you look at the value on the top here, you've got arpeggiator, you've got rate, swing, accent, interval, tempo, arpeggiator mode, arpeggiator octave. So this is really cool. It becomes a really complete arpeggiator you can use right away, and it sends on part 1. I'm saying that because the pads could be assigned to another arpeggiator. So you have 2 arpeggiators in there, and the pads could be assigned to pad, you know, yeah, you see it here, keys or pads. So you could have the keys now, the pads now. So now if I change this, I'm going to control the value of the arpeggiator that is assigned to the pads. And if I assign the pads to a different MIDI channel, it means that this controls 2 different MIDI channels at the same time. And the other one could be a drum, could be a bass line. And these 2 here, now because we're in arpeggiator mode, these are on and off for the arpeggiators. This one for the keys and this one for the pads. So it's really, really interesting, the fact that you get 2 arpeggiators in there, and then it can be assigned to 2 different channels, and you basically have 2 parts you can play in real time, the pad and the keyboard. So the box itself, even without the DAW control, has a couple of surprises by the fact that you've got arpeggiators there. Now, let's actually see how it works when you use it with a DAW. Let's do this first in Studio One, because I have Studio One, and it supports older version. I have Studio One 4. Studio One, whatever, version 4. First of all, to install it, you need to go into Preferences and verify that in Peripherals, you need to add the Impact MIDI control as a controller, and you can also add the keyboard as a node controller if you want. So the 2 of them are separate. One is for all the transport information and remote of Studio One, whereas the other one is to send it the MIDI performance. So the two of them works at the same time. You need to install that. But all of this is very clear from their website. There's videos about it, and there's ways that there's every time you download the not the driver, but the patch to put it in, there's information on how to set it up. So it's very easy, and it works really well. So then what you do is you just take an instrument, you drag it where you need, and then I'll show you what, if you press instrument now, so I can play it. The way it works, it will wait until it crosses the value in memory of the synthesizer before it starts to move. So you might move your knob and say it doesn't react to anything. No, because the value in the synth is at 0. So you have to bring it down to 0. It's going to pick up, and then you can move. It doesn't jump to the knob value. It waits until you pick up the value existing, and then you can just move to the new one. So what I want to show you is that when you move this, now you have control over the pitch, and all of these knobs now do that. There's also another page, and this could be assigned to something by default, or you can assign it something to that you want. So you could also assign this, but the logic is that this could learn any knob that you're moving, and it could become now aware of moving this. So this is interesting because if your plugin does not support this, it means that it could learn to use it. Or, as you know, most plugin you can go on the screen itself and say learn MIDI, and then you turn the same knob and it becomes, so you could still make it work the way you want, like other controllers. But now what's interesting is these things here and this thing here. If I press stop, of course it's stop. I press play, now it starts playing on the screen. Press record, it's going to start recording. And if I go like this, I can move where I want. I can even loop the section I want. And then if I press shift, I've got the tracks I can move different, but now I only have one track. I've got the patches. See, I can just like, so really quick to move. So honestly, it's a big plus. But then again, if the plugin supports it. So some plugins do support DAW controls like that, and others do not. They just haven't been built for that. So together, let's ask all the developers to please support plugin patch control from any remote, because it becomes so easy to integrate your plugin inside my workflow. I mean, it's there. Let's use it. You also have these, you see in this case, S3 is opening up the window where you have all the options. This is to turn on the plugin window, and this is to turn on the mixer window. So it's really interesting. Really quickly, you can see what's happening, and then you can move to your mouse. The big knob here, this is the volume for the active track. So really easy to just, okay, too loud, and then you go to the next track, and then you can do some mixing with that. So really interesting. Function on. Swing. The length. So really fun. It works. I mean, the control you have is really interesting. And then if you turn this one off, now you don't have the arpeggiator. Turn this back on. Because remember that when you're here in function, these now controls keys for the arpeggiator on, off, and pads, the arpeggiator on, off. So you can turn this one off. Right now they're on the same channel, but it could be a different channel. Really cool. If I take another plugin from another company, let's say I take UVI Workstation, and I haven't tried, I don't know if it supports it or not. Let's say just Bidzone and Brass. Here we go. Now if I change, if I turn off, now you see, it doesn't support the pre-assigned controllers to that. So wait a sec, I wasn't in keys. No, it doesn't. But you see at the top of the screen, I have got, it receives something. You see, there's MIDI control here. Send it to that. It just doesn't know what to do with it. So I could just activate learn and teach it to respond to it the way I want, and that will be it. So it receives it, but doesn't know what to do with it. So, okay. But then again, like a lot of other software, you would have to assign the MIDI learn feature so it works correctly. Okay, so that's the logic for Studio One. Same logic for all of the software. You basically turn on the software, add the remote control, and it would work. You know, I did it with Reason 11, did it with Studio One 4, and I did it with Live 10, which is not supposed to work. So I will give you the lowdown on how to make it work with Ableton Live 10, because it's not supported. If you have Ableton Live 10 Suite only, it will work because it actually uses Max MSP to do the remote controls. With Ableton Live 11, you need to follow the information that comes with the downloaded patch if you want. In the version 10, here's what you do. You go in the control surface section, in the MIDI section. You ask in the control surface. Normally, you would say Impact LX Mini. That would be in Live 11, but in Live 10, you don't. You say, I want to have Max for Life. So Max, where is it? Max for Life. So it's basically, you're going to use the plugin Max to remote control Ableton Live. And you say Impact Mini as input and output. Perfect. This is for using this as a controller or remote control of Ableton Live. And you also wanted to use it as a note performance control. So you have to find it where it is and activate at least the track and the remote. And same logic for the input and the output. Here you have input and output. And also added sync because I want this to follow the sync, because there's an arpeggiator in there. So I would like the arpeggiator to follow the one from the speed of Ableton Live and not be just running off goofy where it wants to. Let's actually take a instrument and drop it in. I'm just going to take, I don't know, electric. I'm going to take mallet just to have something. Drop it here. I press play. Go, well, it doesn't work. Well, what you need to do after that is you need to go into Max for Live and you open Max Audio Effect and you look for Impact LX Mini, this one here, and you drag that and you drop it on the master out. It's going to give you this little window at the bottom here. It's loading the effect. You activate everything you want to activate. I activate everything. If I don't like it, I turn it off later on. Now what it means, if I press play now, it actually sends the information. If I go next, you see at the top it changes the measure. If I go like this again, I can loop it. It opens up, it turns on the loop effects section. You can turn on the click, the metronome. You can shift, and then when you go, now the S1 is changing windows. This one is opening up the clip window, and this one is opening up the browser kind of window here. So this is really, you know, you don't need a mouse anymore. You can really go quick between the windows. So you could even, you know, put stickers on there and say, okay, this is this window, that window, and this window. You know, it could be really, really interesting. Let's go back to the bell and turn on. And if I go, you see now I've got the filter cut off here. I've got the resonance, duration, got the ring modulation, the drive. A little bizarre, but you get the drift. Everything works the way it should be. Again, same logic. If the plugin was not made to support it, it won't be able to switch. It won't be able to follow it. You're going to have to activate the MIDI learn and assign the MIDI learn, and it will work. Really cool. Now, I might be a pain in the neck, but I would love to have this type of DAW integration on the iPad, because I'm using iPad most of the time for creation. I also use Ableton Live, but I mostly use my iPad with the hardware to create. So I would like to have this, but I don't think there's any of that in the iPad right now as a kind of an extension of your DAW. So I'm kind of understanding that it doesn't support it for now. So what I'll do next video, I'm going to test this with the iPad because it is USB compliant and it works with the iPad. So how far can I go with it? How can I integrate? Can I use the two arpeggiator, or can I actually reassign these to whatever I want? We'll see. I'm going to go deeper into this using the iPad. And if it's more than a week, it means that I've got to understand more of how it works to make it work. If it's less than a week, it means it's super easy and it was quick and I had time to do it. That's it, people. I think it's an interesting concept. I like it. I mean, the build is good. It's in plastic. It's light. It still feels solid. And the keys, the mini keys, are made. See, honestly, it feels like any other mini key. So it's not bad. It's not good. It's just mini keys. If for portability, it's a good deal. I like these little pluses that they put in. The pads, the arpeggiators. I'm going to test it more. Thank you for watching. That's it. Stay safe, make more music, and see you soon. Cheers.